The double betrayal. Eleanor, Ellie Harding, lived a life that from the outside looking in appeared meticulously crafted, almost idyllic in its quiet suburban perfection. Nestled in a charming, tree-lined enclave of Philadelphia, her house exuded a warmth that mirrored her own gentle nature. Her perennial garden bloomed with vibrant, carefully tended colors, and her days were filled with comfortable, predictable routines that offered a sense of security and calm. At 55, she had a seemingly loving husband, Richard, a man whose easy charm, quick wit, and self-assured demeanor had captivated her since their college days. They had built a successful life, raised a wonderful adult daughter, Maggie, who was Ellie's greatest joy and fiercest pride. But perhaps the most enduring, most cherished pillar of Ellie's world was Laura Vance, her best friend, her confidant, her chosen sister, with whom she'd been inseparable since their freshman year at university. Laura was the vivacious counterpoint to Ellie's quieter, more introspective nature, a whirlwind of boundless energy, infectious laughter, and effortless social grace. They were two halves of a whole, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of youth, or so Ellie, in her unwavering loyalty, profoundly believed. Part 1. The first cracks in the facade. Yet, beneath the polished, seemingly flawless surface of her perfect life, a subtle, insidious unease had begun to fester, spreading like a slow, creeping vine. It started with small things, barely perceptible at first, easily dismissed by her trusting heart. Richard and Laura, usually so seamlessly integrated into their shared activities, their weekly dinners, their couples game nights, their Sunday brunches, began to have more frequent, private jokes that mysteriously excluded Ellie. Their gazes lingered a fraction too long, holding a secret communication she couldn't decipher. Their conversations sometimes dropped to a hushed, conspiratorial murmur when Ellie entered the room, abruptly changing topics as if startled. There were inexplicable, vague shifts in their schedules, flimsy excuses for their separate outings, a new unsettling intimacy that felt like a secret language only they understood, a clandestine pact from which she was deliberately excluded. When Ellie, her heart already tightening with a nascent, unfamiliar anxiety, tried to broach the subject, her burgeoning concerns were swiftly, almost aggressively, dismissed. "You're imagining things, Elle," Richard would say, his voice tinged with a feigned exasperation, a slight edge of irritation. "You're just being too sensitive, honey. You know how Laura and I joke. We've always had a banter." Laura would offer a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, a patronizing, pitying smile playing on her lips. "Oh, Ellie, honestly, you always did overthink things. We're just catching up, like old times, reminiscing about college. Nothing for you to worry your pretty head about." Their combined reassurances, meant to soothe her troubled mind, instead served only to deepen Ellie's profound unease, twisting her genuine intuition into a tangled, suffocating knot of self-doubt and gnawing paranoia. She felt foolish, irrational, hypersensitive, perhaps even irrationally jealous. But the raw, persistent discomfort, a chilling whisper in the quiet, once sacred house, refused to be silenced. Her intuition screamed, loud and clear, that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. As the days stretched into weeks, the whispers grew louder, transforming into a cacophony of relentless doubt inside Ellie's head. Echoing off the walls of her once peaceful home, she found herself living in a constant state of agonizing hypervigilance, analyzing every stolen glance, every whispered word, every subtle shift in their body language, every fleeting touch. Her memory, sharp and unwillingly precise, began to replay countless scenes from the past, illuminating them with a harsh, revealing, almost cruel light. She remembered, with a sickening clarity, her college years with Laura. Laura, always the magnetic center of any gathering, effortlessly drawing people to her with her dazzling smile and quick wit, effortlessly dominating every conversation. Ellie, quieter and more reserved, had always been her loyal satellite, her steadfast supporter, often overlooked, finding her own modest sense of self-worth in the reflected glow of Laura's charisma, in the comfort of their perceived closeness. It was Laura who had initially introduced Ellie to Richard back then, a charming, athletic engineering student who had been one of Laura's many, many admirers. Laura had even seemed to actively push Ellie towards Richard, playing the enthusiastic matchmaker, constantly singing his praises to Ellie. "He's absolutely perfect for you, Elle. So stable, so sweet, such a catch." Now, that memory tasted bitter, like ash and dust on her tongue. Had Laura been setting her up from the very beginning? Had she been a pawn in a game Ellie never even knew she was playing? Ellie recalled countless instances where Laura, seemingly innocently, would subtly undermine her, cloaking her barbed remarks in teasing jokes or veiled constructive criticism. "Oh, Ellie, you're such a worrywart, always so practical, never spontaneous like me. You need to loosen up." And Richard, always so quick to agree, to amplify Laura's dismissive words, his easy laugh joining Laura's. "Laura's not like you, Ellie. She just gets me. She understands my sense of humor. She's not a stick in the mud." These words, once dismissed as harmless banter, as playful comparisons between friends, now resonated with a sinister, mocking undertone. They were not harmless. They were deliberate, insidious tools, carving a canyon between Ellie and her husband, and cementing a twisted, unspoken bond between the two of them, a bond built on her perceived inadequacies. More specific, chilling details began to emerge, sharp fragments that refused to be ignored, coalescing into an undeniable pattern. The way Richard would sometimes use a phrase or an obscure inside joke that only Laura would understand, a reference to a conversation Ellie was never part of. The casual, almost intimate touch of Laura's hand on Richard's arm that lasted a beat too long, a touch that spoke volumes. The discreet, expensive bracelet Richard had given Laura for her birthday, a gift he had mentioned he'd lost when Ellie admired a similar, far less valuable one in a jewelry store. He had brushed off Ellie's disappointment then, saying it was just a cheap trinket, darling, not your style anyway. Now she recognized it as a deliberate, calculated act of deception. A blatant lie. Ellie felt her home, once a sanctuary of love and security, slowly transform into a suffocating cage, a gilded prison woven from countless threads of deceit and betrayal. Her marriage, her most cherished friendship, both were visibly crumbling before her eyes, built on a foundation of meticulously constructed lies. Her vibrant, perceptive daughter, Maggie, now 25 and fresh out of law school, with a sharp intellect and an even sharper moral compass, began to notice her mother's increasing anxiety, the subtle shadows beneath her eyes, the tremor in her hands. Maggie, who had always been acutely attuned to the unspoken currents in their family, approached Ellie delicately, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Mom, you seem so distracted, so tired. Is everything okay? You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "I'm here for you always." Maggie's open offer of unwavering support, a beacon of genuine, unconditional love, only amplified Ellie's profound sense of isolation, making her realize how utterly alone she had felt in her swirling, terrifying suspicions, how desperate she was for someone to believe her. Ellie also remembered a conversation with her wise Aunt Carol, her mother's sister, who lived states away, but was a constant source of quiet strength. Aunt Carol, observing Ellie's tendency to defer to others, had often advised her gently, "Eleanor, darling, your value isn't measured by how much others approve of you. It comes from within. Don't dim your own light just to make others shine brighter." At the time, Ellie had dismissed it as a general life lesson. Now, those words echoed with a chilling prescience, a stark reminder of how much of herself she had sacrificed on the altar of these two relationships. Part 2. The crushing evidence. The anxiety became a suffocating, unbearable weight, pressing down on Ellie, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. She found herself unable to sleep, lying awake for hours, her mind racing, replaying every suspicious interaction, every hushed conversation, every dismissive glance. She found herself searching, almost compulsively, for concrete proof, for something, anything, that would validate her growing terror, and finally, mercifully, end the agonizing uncertainty. She checked Richard's usual phone, scanned his seemingly innocuous emails, feeling disgusted with herself for her clandestine actions, yet driven by a desperate primal need for answers, for the truth. She found nothing conclusive, just ambiguous messages easily explained away by Richard's quick wit and practiced deception. Her stomach churned with self-loathing. Am I really losing my mind? Then came the day her world, already fracturing, finally imploded. Richard was at work, presumably immersed in a crucial meeting. Laura was supposedly out of town on one of her frequent business trips, a convenient alibi she always seemed to have. Ellie was methodically tidying the master bedroom, the space that was supposed to be their sanctuary, the very heart and symbol of their shared life, their enduring commitment. As she smoothed the pristine sheets on Richard's side of the king-sized bed, her hand brushed against something cold and metallic, something small and hard, tucked deep between the mattress and the ornate wooden headboard. It was a phone. Not Richard's usual, perfectly innocent phone, which sat conspicuously on his bedside table. This was an older model, a burner phone, one she had never, ever seen before. Her heart leaped into her throat, a sickening lurch, a premonition of dread. With trembling fingers, so unsteady they almost fumbled, she managed to unlock it. The screen lit up, illuminating the dimly lit room, displaying a series of text messages. And there it was, unmistakable, unforgiving. Conversations, explicit and deeply intimate, exchanged between Richard and Laura. Dates stretching back not just weeks, not months, but years. Pet names, tender endearments, shared secrets, inside jokes that Ellie had never, ever been privy to, that felt like a violation. The meticulous details of clandestine meetings, hotel bookings in nearby towns, stolen weekends, whispered promises. Our little secret, my love. Can't wait to see you tonight, my sweet. She's so oblivious, isn't she? The words were a physical blow, each one a hammer strike to her fragile, trusting soul. She scrolled, numb with horror, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin, recognizing the sheer, terrifying scale of the deception, the calculated, prolonged, utterly cruel betrayal that had been unfolding right under her nose for so long. It wasn't a recent fling, a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a deeply entrenched parallel life, meticulously hidden, carefully constructed over decades, a second reality that had thrived on her unsuspecting ignorance. She saw photos, not just of them together, cozy and intimate, but of Laura, brazenly posing in Ellie's own home, in places that were supposed to be sacred to her marriage, to her family. Laura, laughing, her arm wrapped possessively around Richard, a picture of domestic bliss that was Ellie's, and Ellie's alone to possess. One message, a particularly chilling dagger to her heart, jumped out, burning itself into her memory. Laura's text. "She's so clueless, isn't she? So easy to fool. You keep her distracted." Richard's reply. "She makes it easy, darling. She's too trusting, and so convenient." The world tilted violently on its axis. The air left her lungs, replaced by a suffocating emptiness. The vibrant colors of her carefully tended home faded into a suffocating, nauseating gray. Everything she believed, everything she trusted, everything she held dear, shattered into a million irreparable pieces around her. A catastrophic implosion of her entire existence. The wife, the sister, the friend. All illusions, all a monstrous, elaborate lie. The confirmation, though desperately sought, was not a relief, but a crushing, unbearable weight that threatened to suffocate her, to bury her alive. She wasn't paranoid, she was a victim, and the cruelest, most agonizing part was that she had welcomed her betrayers into the very heart of her home, into the deepest, most vulnerable chambers of her trust. For over 3 decades, the pain was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Part 3. The shattered facade and a daughter's unwavering strength. When Richard returned home that evening, humming the cheerful, oblivious tune as he locked the front door, he walked into a silence colder than any winter night, a silence that hummed with a dangerous, unspoken tension. Ellie sat on the sofa, perfectly still, the burner phone clutched in her hand, her knuckles white, her eyes devoid of tears, burning instead with a furious, icy clarity that made her appear almost otherworldly. Her face was pale, almost translucent, but her gaze was steady, unwavering, holding the power of 1,000 unspoken accusations. "Ellie, what's wrong, honey?" he asked, his easy charm and practiced composure faltering at the sight of her, at the palpable shift in the atmosphere. His eyes, darting nervously, flickered to the strange phone clutched in her hand, and the color drained from his face, leaving him chalk white. "What's wrong, Richard?" Ellie's voice was a whisper, dangerously calm, each syllable a razor's edge. "What's wrong is that for years, my husband and my best friend have been making a mockery of my life, of our marriage, of our friendship, of every single sacred vow. Tell me, Richard, how long has Laura been not like me? How long have I been your convenient wife?" His composure utterly crumbled. He stammered, denying at first, then pleading, begging, pathetic tears streaming down his face, a mask of remorse. "Ellie, please, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." "Explain what, Richard?" Her voice rose, sharp and piercing, slicing through his pathetic excuses. "Explain the hotel receipts? The explicit text messages? The photos? The fact that my own best friend called me clueless and convenient? Explain how you could do this to me, to us, to our daughter, for so long, right under my nose, in our own bed." Just then, the front door opened again, and Laura, having returned unexpectedly early from her supposed business trip, walked in, a bright, oblivious smile still plastered on her face, a casual wave. "Ellie, Richard." "You won't believe what happened on my flight." It was a nightmare. She stopped dead, her eyes wide, her casual demeanor evaporating instantly as they fell on the burner phone in Ellie's hand, then on Richard's ashen, tear-streaked face. Her practiced smile evaporated, replaced by a flicker of cold calculation, quickly masked by a feigned innocence. "Laura," Ellie said, her voice now a low, dangerous growl, resonating with a newfound, terrifying power. "Come in, sit down. We have something to discuss. All three of us, right here, right now." The confrontation that followed was nothing short of brutal, a raw, primal scream of betrayal. Laura, initially, tried her usual manipulative tactics, attempting to turn the tables, to make Ellie feel irrational, jealous, to invalidate her pain. "Ellie, honestly, you're blowing this out of proportion. Richard and I are just friends. He's just been a shoulder to cry on, a sounding board. A shoulder to sleep with." "You mean a sounding board for your shared mockery of me?" Ellie interjected, her voice filled with a raw, unyielding power, a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence, Laura. I have the proof. All of it. The years of lies, the deception, the mockery, the utter, contemptible disrespect. You betrayed me, Laura. As a friend, as a sister." Richard, finally broken, stripped bare of his defenses, confessed. He admitted to the long-standing affair, a sickening betrayal that stretched back almost to the early years of their marriage, a dark secret spanning decades. "She understood me, Ellie," he choked out, his voice pathetic, devoid of any genuine remorse, only self-pity. "She was the only one who truly understood what I was going through. My problems at work, my frustrations." Laura, seeing her game was irrevocably up, simply stared at Ellie with a cold, almost detached expression, an admission of her own callous disregard. A chilling absence of regret. "You were just easy, Ellie," she said, her voice flat, devoid of remorse, almost bored. "Always there, always accommodating. You didn't ask for much. You were convenient." In that crushing, yet oddly liberating moment, Ellie felt a sickening clarity, a profound, undeniable revelation. She hadn't just been betrayed. She had been used, systematically, by both of them. She was the convenient wife, the predictable friend, the easy mark. The backdrop for their sordid drama. The realization was devastating, shattering her world, yet paradoxically, it was also empowering. It cut through the fog of confusion, revealing the ugly truth. Just then, Maggie, her daughter, walked in, her arms laden with bags of groceries from her weekly trip to the store, stopping abruptly at the palpable electric tension in the room. Her keen lawyer's mind, always quick to assess a situation, took in the scene. Her mother's shattered, yet resolute composure, her father's pathetic, tear-streaked face, Laura's cold, defiant facade. Ellie, through her own pain, managed to articulate in a few broken words what was happening. Maggie, without hesitation, without a second thought, dropped the groceries, the apples rolling across the polished hardwood floor, the milk carton tumbling. Her eyes, usually so composed, flashed with a fierce, primal, protective anger. "Dad, how could you? Laura, how could you do this to my mother? To our family? To me?" She rushed to Ellie's side, enveloping her in a fierce, protective hug, a silent testament to unwavering loyalty, to profound love. "Mom, we'll get through this. You're not alone. Not ever. I'm here. We'll fight this together." Maggie's presence, her fierce, unwavering support, was an unexpected lifeline, a powerful emotional affirmation that Ellie still had something precious, something real, something worth fighting for, something utterly untainted by deceit. Part 4. The Unraveling and the Tortuous Path to Healing. The following weeks were a brutal, agonizing blur of pain, legal paperwork, raw emotion, and profound exhaustion. Ellie, unable to bear the suffocating weight of her betrayal within her own home, moved into Maggie's small, sun-drenched apartment for a time, finding solace in her daughter's steadfast presence. She initiated divorce proceedings against Richard, a decision made with a heavy, aching heart, but an unwavering, steel-like resolve. Richard, stripped bare of his comfortable lies, his carefully constructed facade of respectability, seemed to physically shrink before her eyes. A pathetic, morally bankrupt figure, consumed by the crushing weight of his choices. Laura, facing severe social ostracization and the scorn of their mutual friends, though few truly remained, their loyalty having dissolved in the face of her callous actions, retreated into herself. Her once glittering charisma dissolving under the harsh, unforgiving light of exposure. Their illicit connection, once seemingly unbreakable, built on shared secrets and mutual contempt for Ellie, began to fray and crumble under the immense pressure of consequences, public scrutiny, and the glaring absence of convenient Ellie. Ellie also began therapy, a crucial, vital step on her arduous, painful journey towards healing and self-reclamation. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a wise, deeply empathetic, and incredibly insightful therapist in her early 60s, became Ellie's anchor, her guide through the tumultuous storm of her emotions. In their quiet, confidential sessions, Ellie meticulously unraveled the tangled, suffocating threads of her life, revisiting not just the recent, devastating betrayal, but decades of subtle manipulations, of gnawing self-doubt, of the subconscious, almost primal need for external validation, a desperate yearning to be seen, to be loved. Dr. Reed helped Ellie to meticulously dissect and understand the toxic dynamics of her destructive relationships, to identify her own deeply ingrained patterns of codependency, of a deeply suppressed self-esteem, and of an unhealthy reliance on the approval of others for her own sense of worth. Ellie began to understand, with a painful yet liberating clarity, that she had, perhaps unwittingly, contributed to the dynamic, how her innate desire to please, to avoid conflict, to be easy, had made her profoundly vulnerable to those who would exploit her inherent goodness. "You allowed yourself to be convenient, Ellie," Dr. Reed gently explained during one particularly insightful session, her voice calm but firm, "because deep down you believed that was how you earned love, how you earned belonging. But true love, true friendship, true respect never demands that you diminish yourself, that you sacrifice your own integrity, or that you dim your own vibrant light just to make others shine brighter, or to maintain a false peace." Ellie began to truly understand. The words "not like you" and "convenient" were not just casual insults or cruel comparisons. They were deliberate, insidious attempts to define her, to limit her, to make her palatable for their own selfish desires, to keep her in a box where she was easily controlled. She realized, with a profound sense of sorrow, but also a burgeoning strength, that she had spent far too much of her precious life seeking validation from others, bending herself into unnatural shapes that fit their expectations, sacrificing her own needs, her own dreams, her own vibrant essence for the sake of a perceived fragile harmony. The betrayal, though agonizingly painful, became a brutal yet utterly necessary catalyst, forcing her to confront her own long-held patterns, to reclaim her own authentic voice, her own inherent undeniable worth, her own identity, separate from theirs. She systematically, painstakingly, cut all ties with Laura, a necessary, painful amputation. Laura tried to reach out multiple times, sending manipulative texts, leaving tearful voicemails, attempting to apologize and explain, but Ellie saw through the flimsy attempts, the transparent manipulation. "There's nothing left to say, Laura," Ellie stated calmly during one final brief phone call, the absolute finality in her voice undeniable, resolute. "You broke a bond I believed was unbreakable, a trust I considered sacred. You were never my sister. You were just a mirror reflecting my own insecurities back at me, a tool for my own self-betrayal, and I refuse to look in that mirror any longer. Goodbye, Laura." The line went dead, symbolizing a definitive end. Part 5, Reclaiming Eleanor, the Unwritten Future. The divorce was finalized, a bitter, yet ultimately liberating end to a chapter that had lasted for over 30 years, a significant portion of her adult life. Richard, stripped of his comfortable lies, his carefully constructed life of deception, eventually moved away, a shadow of his former charming self, consumed by the consequences of his choices, by the hollow echo of his own betrayal. Laura, too, disappeared from Ellie's immediate orbit, her once glittering, seemingly perfect life now dulled by scandal, ostracization, and the cold, harsh light of exposure. Ellie, though indelibly scarred by the double betrayal, emerged from the emotional ashes with a profound sense of self-discovery, a newfound clarity, and an unshakable inner strength she never knew she possessed. She decided to sell the large, suburban house that had once felt like a gilded cage, a monument to a false life. With Maggie's enthusiastic help, she bought a smaller, sunnier, more manageable cottage closer to the coast, a place that felt truly, authentically her own, a canvas for a new beginning. She meticulously curated her new space, every piece of furniture, every splash of color, a deliberate choice reflecting her true self, not someone else's expectation. She cautiously yet joyfully reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had withered and faded under the demanding, suffocating shadow of Laura's manipulative presence. She even joined a local writing group, finally, bravely, pursuing the creative passion she had put on hold for decades. A lifelong dream she had convinced herself was too impractical, too self-indulgent for her convenient life. Her words, once stifled by self-doubt and external pressure, now flowed freely onto the page, raw, honest, and powerfully therapeutic. She found joy in small, simple pleasures, long walks on the beach, painting landscapes, learning to play the ukulele, things she never had time for before. Her relationship with Maggie blossomed further, deepening into a bond of fierce, unconditional love, mutual respect, and powerful camaraderie. Maggie, immensely proud of her mother's incredible resilience and transformation, became her fiercest champion, her unwavering rock. They took trips together, shared laughter, and forged new treasured memories, untainted by the past. Ellie still carried the scars of the double betrayal, a faint, phantom ache that sometimes surfaced in quiet moments of reflection. But now, they were no longer gaping wounds that defined her, no longer sources of shame or self-pity. Instead, they were badges of survival, profound reminders of the incredible strength she had discovered within herself, the immense capacity for healing and growth she possessed. She learned, with the wisdom that only pain can impart, that true happiness and self-worth didn't come from external validation, from pleasing others, or from the fleeting approval of a husband or a friend. They came from an unwavering inner strength, from profound self-acceptance, from the courage to embrace her authentic self, flaws and all. The convenient woman, the clueless wife, the too sensitive friend, had been utterly shattered, but only to be reborn as Eleanor, whole, independent, vibrant, and utterly, gloriously free. She had not only survived a devastating betrayal, but had transformed it into a powerful, life-altering catalyst for profound personal change, forging a new, exhilarating chapter of her life, one filled with quiet joy, authentic connections, boundless possibilities, and a profound, unwavering sense of hope. The double betrayal, though cruel and agonizing, had ultimately led her back to her true self, a woman who finally, deeply understood her own immeasurable worth.